Welcome to Law and Life Matters podcast. My name is Tebello Motshwane, and our guest today is Mrs. Tebello Motshwane, also known as our sister-in-law. For those of you who don't know her, Tebello Motshwane obtained her law degree from the University of Johannesburg and is an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa. She established sister-in-law in May 2018 after a number of women would approach her on social media and social gatherings for legal insights pertaining to their personal affairs. She came to realize that the lack of education for women dates back to when her parents divorced and her mother was not privileged enough to know basic legal concepts pertaining to the consequences of divorce, child maintenance, and estate planning. Her interest in this field is what led her to pursuing a degree in law and ultimately incorporating Sister-in-Law, which is a platform dedicated to empowering women and the community through legal education. The platform has also had a specific focus on domestic violence and gender-based violence, taking into account that other factors such as emotional, economic abuse have a negative impact on women's affairs in their households. Tebello is passionate about the legal profession and has done extensive work in uplifting young girls and women at large. She has been featured in magazines and interviewed on TV and radio shows, which have highlighted her passion for empowering women through legal education. Tebello is an alumni of the Nelson Mandela Washington Fellowship for the 2021 cohort and is a 2020 Mail & Guardian Top 200 Young South African in the Justice and Law category. She's currently awaiting admission as a notary. Whew. Hi, Tebello. Welcome.
Hi, Ntabi. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for making time for us. My goodness, that bio. I've just read such an impressive and an inspiring bio. And I think the first question I want to ask you is, how often do you sit down or think through and say, wow, that is me, I did that? How often are you able to just sit down and clap for yourself for everything that you've achieved so far?
Sure. Ntabi, to be honest, it's an ironic question because as you know, I have my own podcast which profiles Black women in the legal profession. And I often encourage them to celebrate themselves, stop, pause, or whatever the case is, and take it all in. But I myself don't do that. I don't, and it takes you reading my bio to me and I'm like, who's she talking about? You've said so many nice things. And I'm the one who put my bio together, but when somebody says it, it just sounds so professional. Like, is that really me? So I like that I am finally on the other side of the interview and that I'm able to use this as an opportunity to actually celebrate myself. So thank you for the platform.
No, it's only our pleasure. I think I have taken a lot. I'm someone who also follows your platform, and I've always been inspired by your ability to empower and to celebrate other Black women. So I hope that you do take more opportunities and time to celebrate yourself.
I'm making a mental note of that and I will do just that. Thank you.
And I think just to carry on from there, please may you share with us maybe any memories you have from your childhood and just how you grew up that have maybe added to who you are right now today.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, it's weird because I often want people to tell me about their own childhoods, and then I only get cues from them for what I can add to, their own memories. So having to put that together myself is a little bit of a challenge, but I'll just give you like a high level overview. I was born and raised in Joburg, but from the ages of 2 to 5, my dad had a secondment in Zimbabwe. So we moved to Zimbabwe, close to the University of Harare. So we were staying in Harare, and I attended nursery school there. A very fond memory that I can share from my childhood, specifically in Zimbabwe, was that the caretaker / gardener used to take me to school on the back of his bicycle. You know those bicycles with a little basket at the back?
Yes.
So I used to sit I used to sit comfortably in one of those. I remember wearing a sun hat. It was a yellow sun hat. And every once in a while after school, I would get ice cream. And I never understood why sometimes I get ice cream and sometimes I don't. But I later came to learn from my mom that on the days that I would get ice cream, it was because I hadn't wet the bed the night before. So those were the treats. That's a very fond memory from my childhood in Zimbabwe. We then moved to Joburg, primarily because things had stabilized. My dad always says things had stabilized from, apartheid era, and Nelson Mandela was now president. The constitution was going to be finalized into the constitution that we know today. And so 1996 was a great time for us to move back, or rather, move back to South Africa. So we came back to South Africa, and then I started grade 1. So I started grade 1 at a school called Bryanston. And 1996 was also unfortunately around the time that my parents' marriage started breaking down, and they were fully divorced by 1997. And one of my memories from that was that, we'd constantly ask my mom, personally, I would constantly ask my mom, where's my dad? Where's dad? Where's dad? And she'd say, no, he's at work. And it wasn't so foreign to me because I knew just how busy my dad was at the time. He still is an incredibly busy man, very, very committed to working. To a point where when I lived with him in my older years in high school, I would never see him because he'd leave the house at 5 and he'd be back at like 10 p.m. when I was already asleep. But just going back to my childhood, I would often ask my mom, where is my dad? Where is my dad? No, he's at work. And our time in Joburg in the early years was spent with us moving around a lot. And I think the last recollection I had of how many times we moved was 16 times in the space of 2 years or less. We kept moving from house to house. Eventually, we settled with my aunt for about a year. But later on, I came to learn that after the divorce, my mom was trying to find her feet. She had primarily been a housewife up until the divorce. And then when they separated, that's when she started looking into pursuing her degree. So during that time, when she was pursuing her degree and also trying to hold down a job, she was also trying to make sure that she can afford a bit of stability for us. But obviously things didn't work out. So we'd move from one place to the next. And I now understand that clearly, she would not be able to afford rent in one area, then would move us. And all of those movements were based on us being as close as possible to school. So grade 1 to 3, I did at a school called Brian Evan. And then grade 4 to 7, I went to Midrand Primary. But looking back, we were always trying to move somewhere close to the school, which was walking distance. Back then, walking distance was anything from 2 to 5 kilometers. Okay. The last house we stayed about 5 kilometers from school. So I'd walk 5 kilometers there and 5 kilometers back. But, just going back to that aspect of stability, we then stayed with my aunt because my mom went to then stay with a friend. And the reason why she stayed with a friend was so that she could focus on her final year of studies, obviously without having to keep on, creating instability for us, A. B, it was going to be very weird if she stayed with a friend and then 2 children on top of that, So we then stayed with my aunt for a year. And those are some of the memories I have from childhood, which also then speak into why I started the Sister-in-Law platform.
Just to go back, it also, just from listening to your story and the memories from your childhood, it does sound like you've had a lot of support, and you can correct me here because I'm hearing there was a caretaker, and there was also your aunt who was able to fill in for your mom. Do you think that played a big role even in between the instability? Did it play a big role to make you feel somewhat not too destabilized?
Absolutely. I think my mom and even myself, we've been very, very fortunate to have incredibly amazing family members, incredibly amazing, what's the word I'm looking for? Incredibly amazing friends as well. Because even with myself, when I had my son, I had him when I was 19, I was doing my first year of studies, and the support from my mom was amazing. And truly it's because, she had also been in a situation where once upon a time she needed support while she was completing her studies and while she was, trying to find a stable income. So truly the support structures we have in our lives shape us more than we are willing to admit.
And doesn't it almost feel like you come full circle because now you've created a platform that does exactly that for Black women?
Oh, absolutely. I love that. Yes, definitely. I haven't put that connection together, but I definitely appreciate that connection. Correct.
And also, so do you think you took some, because your mom sounds very resilient, and also your dad sounds like a person, as you say, who works very hard? Are those some attributes that you've taken from them that have assisted you throughout your journey in life?
Absolutely. I think the value that my mom has placed on education has been unmatched. She is one person that obviously understands that if she could have done things differently, I'm sure she would have really fought hard to complete her studies at a younger age than having to, first sit through being a housewife and then complete her studies only because she was now faced with this divorce or this separation. But she places a lot of value on education. She places a lot of value on independence, which is exactly what I got from her. And then coupled with my dad's, business mindedness, hardworking spirit, commitment and dedication to his craft, I can definitely see how I've taken aspects from both of them. Yes.
Okay, that sounds really great. I was asking that because I could pick up on that. Also, just now, why law then? Where does the law fit into your life? At which point did you learn about the fact that you can study this LLB degree and become a lawyer?
So my late grandfather often used to draw, parallels between my actions and me being a lawyer. So he planted seeds maybe on 2 or 3 occasions that stand out to me. One of the occasions was me asking about why, I don't understand why we're constantly moving and why my parents no longer stay together. I don't understand why we have to visit my dad on some weekends and some holidays. What happened to my parents living together? Why is this happening? And my grandfather then said to me, no, your parents went through a divorce. And in order to understand what's happening, you have to study law. And I was like, oh, okay. Okay, this law thing sounds interesting. I am quite curious to know what happened with my parents and why our living situation is like this. Another time was when, it had been very, very cold, and I was trying to figure out why the cows were sleeping outside in the cold, and I kept bugging my grandfather, like, oh, why are the cows sleeping outside? They should at least get a house built for them or whatever to keep them warm. And my grandfather was like, yo, you advocating for animals, you really need to consider studying law because you're always speaking up for people. I remember I would also speak up for my aunts, so my dad's younger sisters. We're around about the same age. But because my grandfather was a priest and my grandmother was Mamfundisi, they really hated seeing knees. Like if my aunt was wearing anything just 1 centimeter above her knee, they'd basically be like, you know, like, why are you walking around naked? And I'd always be like, Rakadi's not naked. She looks very nice. All her age mates are dressed like this, you know. And my grandfather would be like, yo, there goes our lawyer again. And so for a long time, I did think I was going to be an attorney or a lawyer. You know, those seeds were planted. But I have to admit that around high school, they became a pivot. I don't know if you're familiar with Deborah Patta.
Yes,
but I was like, okay, I am going to be the next Deborah Patta. I'm going to be an exceptional investigative journalist, and I'm going to own the seat that Deborah Patta's on. She was so cutthroat in her interviewing skills. And, you know, she would really poke and prod until you almost cracked under pressure and gave her the answers that she was looking for. And I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. So a lot of my high school life, I spent working towards the fact that I'm going to study journalism. If all else fails, I'm going to go study drama at Wits. And I had this conversation with my mom probably sometime in grade 11, and she was like, no. Why, like, what are you going to do? Act on Generations, you know? And at the time, I was like, I mean, that's not a bad thing to do. I'm going to be with Action Morocca. So I'll be with the Moroccas. That's not a bad thing to do, you know?
Not at all.
And she was like, no, why don't you, you know, do law? Because even if you do law, it really can still speak into, you know, some of the skills you're going to learn will speak into journalism, will speak into you being an investigative journalist, because law has a lot of research, law has a lot of history. Law also will give you even more exposure to the English language. And I was like, I was hesitant, to be honest, because I was just focused on taking Deborah Patta's job from her. But come application time, I honestly did then put law as my first option and put journalism as my second. And I think psychology was my third option. Very glad psychology didn't work out, because I then came to learn that there was statistics in during the year. And my math was so bad that I wouldn't have ever survived that first year anyway. So I then got accepted into law school. And yeah, the rest is almost history. But I got accepted, you know, growing up, I knew that it's either I'm going to, you know, do family law or I'm going to do criminal law. So I knew that I'm going to be those people on TV. No, Your Honor, my client is innocent. Or, you know,
objection, Your Honor.
Objection, exactly. Objection, Your Honor. I was like, okay. So I knew that I don't want to be that attorney. I want to be the one that's understanding what's going on with the divorce side of things. And luckily, first year was the year where we did family law, and then I got to understand the dynamics of being married in community property versus out of, child maintenance, having a will in place, all of this, which really then started putting together some of those missing pieces of the puzzle of my childhood growing up, why my mom was, you know, basically left with nothing, you know, that had a lot to do with the marriage regime. Then that also then really spoke into how I came about with having the idea for sister-in-law, because once I was done, I was like, okay, what can I do with this degree now that I'm sure that I don't want to be in practice? What can I do with this degree that will enable me to make sure that women don't find themselves in the same position that I found that my mom found herself in, you know? And it just didn't make sense to me that a lot of the time women are only exposed to the kind of things I share on sister-in-law only when it's too late, you know, or only when they've paid for a consultation. Some of the information that I share, I don't want you to have to only find out, you know, after the fact.
Yes.
So yeah, let me just, you know, stop there for now, because I see some of my childhood is now coming back into my adulthood.
You were
And
advocating.
I might be taking the questions out of your mouth. I'm not used to being on the side of the interview.
No, it's okay. Just to interestingly, you mentioned that so you're in varsity, you're doing your LLB degree. Did you serve your articles?
I
Or
did
rather,
serve
well,
my
obviously you did because you are an attorney.
yeah,
But
I did serve my articles.
yes.
But like I said, I only started learning later on in my degree that this qualification is wider than I had ever anticipated. I was like, okay, so it's not just criminal law, it's not just family law. There's constitutional law, there's administrative law, there's law of evidence, there's this, there's that, international law, intellectual property law itself. I started learning that, okay, this is vast, you know. Through all of that, though, I knew for sure that I don't want to go the advocacy route. I always knew that I'm not going to be objection, Your Honor, you know.
Okay.
The first time we went to, okay, firstly, I hated moot court. Absolutely hated. It was the most, it really, really grated me.
Yeah.
I hated moot court with a passion. And then secondly, we went to court. I think it was like an excursion during first year sometime. Okay. And I don't know if it was the cases we were exposed to, but court was such a snooze fest. It was nothing like the stuff I was seeing on like Law and Order or Boston Legal. It was just a snooze fest. There was no objection, Your Honor. It was just boring. And I was like, I'm not gonna do this for the rest of my life. And then towards the end of my degree, I started being in a panic because I learned that people were already signed up for articles from as early as second year or towards the end of, second year. Yeah. And I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? Where did these people get this kind of information, Then I think third year was the first time I became aware of things like career day. So I went to the stalls and, collected free stationery. I love those career days. Collected free stationery from all the stalls and obviously information packs. And that's when I started then being very intentional about applying. I then got an opportunity to do VAC work in Cape Town. And it was so amazing that I really thought, okay, next year I'm going to finish my degree and then I'm moving back to Cape Town because this is where I'm going to do my articles. Okay. The feedback I had also received from like HR was very, very promising. So I knew that, okay, I've got these articles in the bag. And then to my shock and horror, I received an email that said you had been unsuccessful, but we really enjoyed having you. So please come join us for VAC work again in December. And I was like, oh, my parents don't have money to take me back to Cape Town and whatever. If I'm not going to work here, then what's the use of coming back for VAC work? Yeah. Anyway, I then completed my studies the following year. And I literally had no articles secured for the following year. And I was panicking because I had been applying diligently. Basically, my day entailed studying, then, or rather being on campus for lectures, then spending 2 to 3 hours in the library, busy, sending out applications. And then a lot of the time I would change my commuting route. I was taking taxis. So a lot of the time I'd first get off in Sandton, drop off my CV physically at a couple of offices that I didn't even know were hiring or not, but I would Google law firms in Johannesburg and take notes and write that down and, also spend time around where I stayed, just handing out my CV, even volunteering to work for free or just do job shadowing and whatnot. Because I was like, okay, it's the end of the year and I still don't have articles. And then luckily around the 7th of December, that final year, I got invited for an interview, and then they kept quiet because they were like, okay, we'll let you know by next week if or not, whether or not you'd be starting articles in January. Then they only replied, they only informed me on the 23rd of December. That was like pretty much Christmas, you know? And I was like, oh my God, thank God. Yeah. I then started articles at the company, and it was absolutely horrible. I lasted 6 months.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
It was insane. It was horrible. It was a law firm.
Sorry, just before we go there, of your articles experience, I just want to take you back a bit because you've said a lot of what I think is very important. First you've mentioned that you knew immediately that you didn't want to go the advocate route. And I think I'm just thinking of my own experience that I also just felt like there were only two routes. Either you're going to be an attorney or you're going to go be an advocate. And you speak a lot about how they'll only in your second year, once you're noticing that your peers had already signed articles, only in your third year, you're also getting all this information about, oh my gosh, you have to apply for these articles. You have to find law firms. This is how you have to go about it. Do you think that I personally think that it's crazy that from the time you studied and from the time I studied, obviously this is still the same issue. There's still a big concern around what we know we can do with our LLB degree. Understanding the route to becoming an attorney, to becoming an advocate. And so my question then would be, how do you think we can do better as legal professionals now? And just how do we help students? I mean, obviously I'm seeing a lot of there's new platforms, just like your platform. There's another platform that I've seen, but that one's called Employer Lawyer. I just don't know if we truly understand what we can do with our LLB degree.
Yeah, absolutely. The information, I think the information was there maybe, but we weren't as exposed to it because, honestly speaking, social media has also played a very important role in making us more aware of the different aspects of the law, or rather the different practice areas we can find ourselves in. So, I feel that back then it really was just, you're either going to become an advocate or you're either going to become an attorney. Having said that, though, I want to highlight the fact that during my time, it was very popular for people to go the articles route before they go advocacy route. I think it's a very recent practice that people are able to pursue pupillage straight from varsity. It wasn't common back then. And also, a lot of the time, I feel that now it's almost like pupillage is almost exclusionary because there is no income when you're doing pupillage. But historically, it was, or rather popularly back then, it was something you did after many years of practicing as an attorney, having a stable income that allowed you the flexibility to then pursue pupillage for a year, right? You would have saved up while you were an attorney. You would have saved up for X amount of years. And by the time you're ready to then make the conversion, you've saved up enough to keep you going for that year. So the advocacy route wasn't even something that would have been at the top of many of my peers' priorities back then. I don't think we were exposed to the fact that we could do the pupillage route unless you already had somebody maybe in your family that's an advocate, or a very close family friend that's an advocate, who was then going to groom you, and then you basically then transition straight from varsity, you do your pupillage and be considered as a student, and continue having funding from your parents or whatever the case is.
No, I think, yeah, I think because I mean, I was at my final year was 2017, and yeah, the idea of pupillage was not something that any of my friends and I spoke about. It was always, you need to get articles, that's the best route. You just need to become an attorney. And even when, and like, as you say, I once shadowed an advocate, and he too went through the route that you're explaining, which is to he was an attorney first about 5 years, and then he did the conversion and did his pupillage. So I wonder, do you think that maybe it's as a result of the unemployment rate of adult graduates that maybe people are now thinking, you know what, I might as well try this pupillage route?
Sure. I think there are a lot of factors that come into play, but I'm going to answer this question. But just to answer your question, I really want to say that we need to take ownership of our careers. We can't let things happen to us. We have to happen to our careers, and we have to be proactive. We have to be willing to do the work as well. By do the work, I mean there are a number of platforms that exist, Sustain Law included, that already simplify the information for you.
Yes.
There's also Google search for anything you don't understand.
Yes.
But for example, a lot of the time I'll have students sending me messages, on social media. Hi, I just wanted to find out, what is the difference between being an advocate and being an attorney? And then I'll be like, okay, firstly, this first and foremost is information that's available on Google. Secondly, I've had interviews with attorneys, with advocates, where we extensively explain the difference between the two. Thirdly, I've also had posts, just on my timeline. It just, to me, then goes to show that you only saw my bio, you saw that I'm an attorney, so you want to ask me this question, but you haven't even bothered to click around and see what's going on the Sustain Law page and familiarize yourself with the information that I've curated and simplified for your benefit. So you just have to be willing to do the work. Go out there and ask questions once you've done your research. I want you to say, hi, I'm Tabi saying, I've been following your page for quite some time. I noticed that you spoke about the difference between an attorney and an advocate. I know for sure that I want to be an attorney, but I've been looking for specific information pertaining to aviation law. I don't see anything on your page. I'm interested in aviation law. Can you please, tell me where I can turn to find more information, or whatever the case is? Then I'm like, okay, Ntabi Singh has done her research. I'm impressed. She's correct. I don't have anything on aviation law. Let me see who I can talk to then, have a coffee with her or a Zoom session, 30 minutes, just to explain to her exactly what an aviation law attorney does on a day-to-day basis. So you need to go out there, do the work, do the research, and then only reach out to myself and other women or my peers or whoever I've interviewed. Then only reach out to them after you've said, oh, hi, Lerato, I listened to one of your podcast interview with Tebello. You spoke about mergers and acquisition. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I have an interest in it. Then Lerato's going to know that, okay, at least this person has gone out to do the work. You know? They now need, this is information that they can't Google because they want a personal account of what does a M&A attorney do on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of people are getting, I don't know if it's lazy or if it's entitled, but they're just not wanting to do the groundwork and the research. I promise you, if you are able to watch a few episodes of your favorite series on Netflix, you can use that same energy to really just start building your career.
No, I
often share that this platform it's not, it's nobody in varsity says you can be an attorney but you don't have to practice, and in not practicing you don't have to do in-house, you can do something similar to sustained law. Nobody says that. So I created this platform for myself, so you can definitely go out there, be like Employ a Lawyer, be like For Women in Law, be like Legal Eagles SA, whatever. You can create something for yourself outside of the common practices that we know and associate with holding a degree in law.
No, I think I absolutely agree with you, because our podcast, Law and Life Matters podcast, is in partnership with an organization called South African Black Women in Law. And one of the values of our organization has always been the term Vuk'uzenzele, and meaning wake up and do things for yourself, take charge. And that's something that I got introduced to this organization when I also, after I was the same as you, after my degree, hadn't secured articles, so was also in a panic. But I had to make the decision to say to myself, okay, think of it as you have time. What can you do in this time that's going to get you to where you need to go? And I found myself, following you on Twitter, following Sinako and the Sinako We Can movement, and just being intentional about, I want to be in the legal space. So I'm going to follow all these people who are already in the space and ahead of me. So I absolutely agree with you about, we need to take charge of our careers. Yes, there's a lot of obstacles, and but where you can, you should be in where you have control, take charge. So I definitely agree with you, and thank you for that. I really hope that our listeners will take that and run with it. So just now go back. So there you are now, you start your articles, and as you said, you lasted 6 months. Not something I haven't heard before. A lot of people have said articles was like the worst thing ever. For some, even made them hate the law. So what happened for you? And did it make you hate the law, or was it just okay, this is not what I'm going to do here?
So the challenge that I had at the first firm was, obviously with the benefit of hindsight, I came to learn that it was very difficult being in a small law firm where there's no middleman between, for example, management and juniors. So it was, a one-man owned firm. Exposure is great, yes, because you get to run with a lot of matters at the same time. But if the person you're working for is a dictator and not really invested in like teaching you, or they're a dictator, and when you make a mistake, it becomes a shouting contest, like basically somebody saying, you don't know how to use your brain, or this is not logical. Of course, I don't know how to use my brain like an attorney. I'm fresh out of varsity. And of course, some things are illogical that I'm doing. They're not making sense. But what you're supposed to do is then show me, this is how you draft a summons. Where I've made a mistake, say, no, you need to be able to tell a story in the summons. What time was it when the car accident happened? What cars were they driving? How do you identify the cars? What color was it? What's the registration plate? Show me how to put those pieces together. Don't, if you see that I've left information out, just say, yo, you don't know how to think. No, I don't know how to think like an attorney yet, So that was the challenge that I was having. Then, my articles ended in June, and I was prepared to just sit it out. I was like, whether or not I have employment after this, I'm out.
Yeah.
I then got articles the following year, luckily started in January.
Okay.
And from about week 2. Yeah. I remember at some point, it was either week 2. No, I think it was from the 2nd month, because I remember on my way home thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I still have 22 months of this. Because in that moment, I made a decision that no matter what happens, I am holding on to this job with everything in me, because at the end of this 2 years, the only thing I want to see is myself in court being admitted as an attorney. And I'm not going to back down from this. I've come way too far. Challenges of being in varsity with a newborn initially, because I gave birth during the January of first year. So basically I did my whole degree with a baby. I haven't come this far only to give up now, So in the 22 months, I was like, I cannot believe this is going to be my life. And it was a very depressing 22 months. It was a predominantly white law firm. And looking back, or not even looking back, in the moment, you feel the microaggressions. But now you're in a position where you can't necessarily speak up too much about the racism and everything that's going on, because here I am, I gave up on my articles last year. I can't do it again. But now I can't use my voice the way I want to use my voice, because if I step on some toes, I could get fired. Be that as it may, I really did try to speak up against injustice every once in a while when I could notice that, actually, hang on, what Amy said, obviously Amy's not her real name, but what Amy said and what John said doesn't sit well with me. There were many interactions, conversations, instructions where you could tell that, okay, here I'm not being taken seriously because of the color of my skin, or here I'm not given an opportunity to shine because of the color of my skin, or here my colleague was shouted at because of the color of her skin, but when Amy made the same mistake, it was almost brushed under the carpet and, it's a learning curve, don't worry, Amy, why don't I get the same grace for the learning curves? And there was, a situation I remember where I think during those first 2 months, I had been given a research, basically I had to write an opinion on something. And I wrote the opinion, and my senior associate was very, very impressed. And he was like, I'm actually going to go tell the managing partner about this opinion myself. He went, and I was given, all the recognition. But when that same matter then progressed to litigation, I was told to hand over my files to Jennifer.
Oh, no.
Jennifer was basically somebody who had not even completed her studies at the time, right? I think she still had X amount of months left, or she had to write exams or whatever. And then I was like, how? But what do you mean I have to now hand over my files to Amy? Like, I want to, this is my matter. And I wrote the opinion that was, award winning. And that's when I started realizing that, now Amy's going to get the exposure to the trial and, going to basically have an amazing time. And then there was also another incident that I remember, that we had one taxi association as a client.
Okay.
And it took me a while to realize that, hang on, every time we have the taxi association, I'm called into the meetings, even though they are not my client. And I was like, oh, snap, we need to show the Black members of the taxi association that our firm also has, Black women. And I was just like, and I remember speaking to a male colleague about this. I was like, I don't know, am I seeing things or am I being used here? And he was like, damn, like they're making it so obvious. It's not even funny. This is not even your matter. But every time there's a meeting, you're reeled into it because now the client is Black. So those were the sort of things that I was just like, Anyway, at some point in the 2 years, I started having a big mouth and I started speaking up against some of these things. And I remember then being called a rebel, which reminded me exactly of high school. Because high school, when I started speaking up against injustices, I had a teacher who would call me Julius Malim. And in itself, but
yeah,
we all know that Julius is controversial and he speaks
yeah.
out against injustice all the time. So when I then had like a senior years after high school then call me Julius Malema once again, I was like, okay, so you clearly ruffle a few feathers every time you speak up against injustice. But just on that, it was very humbling a few years later when I had left the firm already, obviously. But a few years later, someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and they were like, oh my goodness, you are the famous Tebello who started a mini what was it? I don't know. Let me not say riot, but basically you opened up
You
doors
began
and the
the movement.
conversation
Yeah.
of transformation in the workplace. And that person was then explaining that they had now advanced to like a memo that they were taking to the managing partners about issues of transformation and whatever. And apparently I was then quoted in one of the memos saying, when Tebello was here a few years ago, she had conversations with so and so and so and so. And it was remarkable because in the moment when you're doing this thing, you have no idea how empowering and how liberating it's going to be for the people who are coming after you. You thinking, oh, I'm just doing this because this is unfair right now. And at the time, I think I was just being selfish. I just wanted to be heard. And it was probably to make things better for me. But in making things better for myself, what that did was literally lay the groundwork for the people who are coming after me. And I really want to believe that the firm is a bit more aware now of issues of microaggression, racism, undertones, or underhand comments, and so forth.
Sure. I think, firstly, thank you, because it's always so nice to have someone who is ahead of you speak so candidly about the things that you also feel you're experiencing, because it's affirming, I don't know if you've read the book, A Black Girl's Guide to Corporate South Africa, and those stories about just corporate South Africa and the experiences of Black women, and you've told exactly those same stories, and it affirms that you're not crazy. Those things were really happening to you. And in the same token, well, shout out to your late grandfather, because I think he hit the nail on the head, because he knew who you would become.
Thank you.
As you said, you like you're saying, maybe you felt like it was just being selfish, but you really did have an impact, and you found a way to continue to do that. So I think that's great. I think, yeah, man, it's really inspiring. So so after you do get admitted, do you continue to practice, or what happened after your admission?
Sure. After my admission, no, not even after my admission. I knew obviously from month 2 that, yay, I'm not going to do this beyond this point. So my articles finished in January, and as my articles were finishing, I was starting to research how to register a company. Okay. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a businesswoman. This is from primary school days. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I should have mentioned this earlier actually, that I started a car wash business in primary school with my brother. I think he was 6 at the time and I was around 10. So we used to walk around our neighborhood with a bucket and sunlight and a scrub lap and a brush. And we used to wash cars on the weekend. And I think I was either getting 5 or 10 rand per car. I want to say it was 10 rand per car. And we used to wash cars. And I think business was called Splash Mobile or something along those lines. And I did this for 6 months until basically the weather started changing, and it was the winter period, and my mom was like, I don't want to hear anything about children playing with water during the winter season. So my mom crushed my dreams. And then I think a few years later, maybe a year or two later, I reinvented myself and started selling the pin pop and yogetas at school. Very, very controversial. We started getting in trouble because inside a pin pop there was gum, and the school policy was that we can't chew gum. So now here I was busy trying to smuggle the pin pop in, sell underground with only the select few people knowing that you're selling this. And that's where I really started learning that I definitely want to be a businesswoman when I grow up. I didn't know what shape or form it was going to take. But I really was excited by the fact that I had some independence. Like, I was that girl who I think one packet of pin pop would yield like a 30 rand profit. But I was then the girl who didn't have to ask my parents for money. The only thing I'd do is whenever my mom would go to the shops, I would be like, oh, mom, please buy me a big packet of yogeta or a big packet of, the pin pop. And I was just very independent, and I was like, I like this thing, I didn't know that there would be formalities of registering a private company. I didn't know that I was a sole trader. I just knew that I love this independence. So then I grew with that in mind. Anyway, at the very end of my articles, I then register a company, and I'm like, now I'm stuck between not being admitted, but having finished my articles. So I can't go out there and pretend to be an attorney. So what can I do? Then learned that I could just offer legal advice with a disclaimer saying, obviously, they letting clients know that I haven't yet been admitted as an attorney, but basically I've given you enough researched information to get you to the next step. So at least now, after speaking to me, you know that the next step is for you to write a letter of demand, or the next step would be for you to go to small claims court, or the next step is for you to go to the CCMA. So things like that. So I then started a company called Collective Intelligence, where I advised on issues of intellectual property, company law, a little bit of insolvency, and I think a little bit of labor law. And that started taking shape nicely. It really, just through word of mouth, it really took off in a comforting way, in a way that I knew, okay, this is where the money's at. What? Everything that comes is coming directly to me. There's no employer who is still going to apportion my salary and whatnot and whatnot. It was really good. It was really good. Until about 8 months in, when I made a boo-boo that literally set me back. I think it was 35K. And I was like, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to pay this 35K? So what I ended up doing was then going back to employment. But then I didn't go back to practice. I went and did in-house legal. And I just kept thinking, I need to pay off this 35K and then try to recommit to this business, because I couldn't now serve business and employment. One was slacking, and it had to then be the business at the time. And during that's when sister-in-law was actually born, because a lot of the time the Collective Intelligence clients would be coming for business related advice, but then especially women would end up asking questions about, oh, my husband and I are going through a divorce, or oh, my father passed away, we are fighting for this and that, or oh, I want to get a will drafted, how much does it cost to draft a will, and where do I start, blah blah blah. Or I want to find out how I can claim maintenance from the father of my children. And I was like, there's no ways that women must be paying to have this kind of information. This information is empowering. Why don't I just start a blog where I start sharing these like teething issues that don't need you to pay 2K for a consultation? And then I started sister-in-law around 2018. I think it was either 2018, definitely, May 2018. And it was basically a platform dedicated to empowering women through legal education. And I was sharing things like maintenance, things like divorce, marriage contracts, wills and estate planning, basically all those little nuggets. And then I got approached by True Love magazine, and they were like, hang on, this is exceptional, can you please be part of our Women's Month campaign in August, where we're basically going to be celebrating women like yourselves who are empowering other Black women and, just passing the baton and educating us. And then that's when I really knew that, oh my goodness, this could turn into something. And at the time True Love approached me, I had less than 100 followers. And I was like, what? They're interested in little old me. I think I had like something dumb, 53 followers or whatever. But the fact that at the time the editor Mbali saw the potential of the platform was exceptional. And I was like, yay, once True Love knows about this platform, they're obviously going to pull in their crowd or their readership, and more people will get to know about this platform. And really it took off from there to a point where a lot of people don't even know that my main business is collective intelligence. Sister-in-law was a side hustle, which then started generating an income. So I really became lucky, but it just goes to show that you really can build and curate your career. You can take ownership, be in the driver's seat. Don't let your career happen to you. You need to be intentional about happening to your career.
And also just staying true to, your passion, because I think sometimes it can be so easy for us to stay stuck in a particular job because we're too afraid. Yes, granted, there are things that you have to accept, like you even acknowledging that, okay, I've had this boo-boo and there's this 35K, possibly the best way for me is to go back to employment, but that was more of a means to an end rather than I'm just staying here and I'm sticking it out and I'm gonna forego everything or rather who you are, who you truly knew you were. I mean, to speak on sister-in-law, I remember you had your Lady Justice workshop in, I think it was March 2019. And obviously I have no kids, I've never been married. I was just a candidate attorney at the time. And I was just like, wow. So I came to the event and I just like, wow. Yay. Yes, I was there at the event and I was just like, my goodness, the number of questions that are coming out of here. Like, this is basic knowledge that people deserve to have. But you could tell from the questions that were coming out that women just didn't know. Didn't know, and beyond not knowing, they didn't really know who to go to.
Exactly.
To get that information. And granted, I mean, like we have mentioned that you can go to Google, but sometimes Google won't always explain something to your level of understanding. And sometimes also you just need someone who's a bit more sensitive to your particular situation. And I think the speakers you had that day understood that, and they were able, because they also had personal stories. I remember, I think the one lady who spoke about maintenance had her own personal story. So it being someone who had, doesn't have all of those experiences, it felt very safe, and it felt like, man, this is how we should be informing people. So that was a really, really brilliant workshop.
Thank you so much. I just want to touch on how you can basically reinvent yourself as many times as you need to, Tabi. Like, just stay away from comparing yourself to your peers. Because if I had been like, oh no, if I had stayed in practice, I would have been a director by now and I would have been earning X amount. That wasn't my journey. Everybody who are my peers and they are senior associates now and they're directors, that was their journey. And if I had been stuck in the beginning of knowing that I'm very unhappy in practice, I probably wouldn't have made it that far because the quality of my work would have been poor because I just don't want to be there, you know? So reinvent yourself as much as you possibly can. And obviously where it's practically possible to do so, but you need to be intentional about it and just look away from being on the same level of your peers. Sacrifices sometimes have to be made, but those sacrifices are really going to be rewarding in the long run. There's nothing that I treasure more than, firstly, being able to be present for my, child's milestones. I recently had a baby, she's 4 months, and I wasn't present during my early studies when I was a first year. My mom had the baby, she was raising the baby. I have no recollection of when he started sitting. I have no recollection of when he started walking. I have no recollection of his first words because I was studying when I was doing all of that. But now, because I made a few sacrifices along my journey, I am present for all of my child's, milestones at the moment. I own my time. Well, that's a bit of a lie. Like, clients own my time, but I have flexibility to decide when I want to do certain things, yes, I have a deadline for tomorrow, whatever, but I can do this deadline while I watch my baby, I'm not confined to having to physically get out of the house or get out of bed and go to the office, or whatever the case is. I own my time, but that's because I made sacrifices. And owning your time is also not something that you should aspire to do. Not everybody is going to be the founder of their own business or the owner of their own business. Not everyone is going to be self-employed. That's just the way the world operates. You have to be passionate about climbing the corporate ladder. Something I wasn't passionate about, but I was passionate about being an entrepreneur, being in business. So the root or the foundation of all of this is primarily being honest to yourself. You're going to have to do a few things that you don't want to do to then figure out exactly what you do want to do. And all of those components build up to the person that you'll eventually be. So go through the grit of hating articles, go through the grit of hating moot court, go through this, go through that, go through the disappointments, go through failing, go through reinventing yourself. But all of those components are going to make the person you are eventually going to be and love.
No, thank you. So you do sister-in-law, and then eventually I don't know if we're gonna call it, it's not a reinvention, but almost like a sister to sister-in-law, which is the Sisters in Conversation. How did that come about? Because I think with the sister-in-law, it seemed like it was more of let me just educate people, and then now you have Sister in Conversation, which for me personally, as someone who consumes the content, it's okay, she's one, amplifying and empowering and showing off Black female excellence. And at the same time, it's given me the opportunity of having a sort of a virtual mentorship, having these women and having women that maybe I probably would have not known about accessible to me now through your podcast. When did Sister in Conversation come about, and what was your why for it?
So you've hit the nail on the head with the mentorship aspect. I was following a number of amazing women who I looked up to. And the women, especially season one, the women in the interview, it didn't seem like they were celebrating themselves. Also, it didn't seem like they had a platform to make some of the issues they would share on their social media pages or share in conversations with me. It didn't seem like they had the platform to amplify that. So I was like, so I remember thinking to myself, I want to start a podcast, but I didn't have a structure for it. But I remember that initially my idea was just to interview women, like Black women who are doing good things with, their careers. So I don't know if you're familiar with She Brigade by Pelontle. I was going to do something similar to that, but then I was like, but I don't want to speak to like pilots. I don't want to speak to women in engineering or whatever. So why don't I actually just focus on Black women in law who don't often celebrate themselves, but they are doing exceptional work in their chosen, practice areas. And yeah, that's literally how it came about. And I was like, I want to have a conversation with women who will share their own experiences so that they can educate those or empower those who are coming after them. If you listen to whoever's interview, listen to her experience, listen to what she does on a day-to-day basis, listen to how she's overcome some of the challenges, then you as Ntabiseng can say, oh, okay, so and so made a mistake in doing ABC. We don't all have to make the same mistake. I've now learned that I can avoid this by doing ABC. And that's exactly what I wanted. A platform where you can be mentored into eventually choosing what you want to do with your qualification.
No, it's definitely, I always say, every time I listen, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite episode. And then another one comes and I'm like, oh, this is so, you know what? All of it is my favorite.
Thank you.
So
that is the impact that I wanted. But also one of the things was that I wanted it to be an easy way to network. I can't tell you how incredible or how incredibly open my guests are to giving you airtime. If you say, hi Manchadi, I listened to the conversation you had with Tebello. I've had an interest in insolvency law. Please can you tell me ABC? Manchadi is going to be excited to say, oh my goodness, this girl, first of all, cares about me as a person. And these are the takeaways that she got from what I had to share. So I'm definitely going to give her 30 minutes of my time. Or hi Tanvia, I heard you spoke about being a foreign national and not being able to practice, but you went to work at Concord for free. Can you tell me more about your application at the Constitutional Court? It's easy for Tanvia to then say, okay, you've gone out, you've listened to my interview. I didn't address these specific issues that you want to know. I can give you 30 minutes. And that's an easy networking session. After you've had those 30 minutes with Tanvia, Lerato, Manchadi, whoever, Zimasa, then it's going to be somebody who you can constantly email. Hi, I'm finally doing my first year of articles. Thank you so much for having looked at my cover letter when I asked you to last year. That's a connection you then have for the rest of your life.
So true. So true. Just before we sort of end off, I have friends, I have family, who always, you try to convince people that you need a will. If you could tell people, our listeners who can share, with their families and for themselves, why is it important to have a will?
Sure. So, it's so incredibly difficult for especially the Black community because, death is a taboo subject. We don't talk about death. And now you're talking about wills. Why do you want to know if I have a will, Manaka? Like, what's going on? Your parents start getting uneasy about some of that. So I always say the best way to go about starting the conversation with, especially our parents or even with our romantic partners, our sisters, whatever the case is make them listen to some of the content I've shared on YouTube. Make them read some of the posts I've shared on my platform. Or even just, look for a simple article on 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 Google or even on my website where you can start the conversation by saying, Yo, Mama, do you know that if you die without a will in place, then Papa Greg or Papa George is going to get everything you own by virtue of you guys being married in community of property or whatever the case is, have those conversations so that your mom is exposed to the fact that even though her and Papa Greg haven't been staying together for X amount of years, he can still come back after she dies and take everything and possibly even kick the children out of the house. The children who don't know any better can be kicked out of the house because they didn't divorce and your mom didn't have a will in place. So he's still married. So have those conversations where it maybe starts off by possibly scaring them a little bit, or, hey, mom, you don't have a will. I'm done with my articles. I'm pretty stable, but my younger siblings, they are minors. This is what would happen to your money if you die without a will. It's going to go to the guardian's fund, and your children won't be able to immediately access those funds until such time as they are 18. If you have a will in place, do you know that you can also set up a testamentary trust, and that will enable us or enable the younger siblings to be taken care of in your absence? It will give them a smooth transition, So have those kind of conversations. First, showing them the negative side of not having a will, and then start speaking about the legal benefits to having a will. What will happen to their properties? What will happen to the house? You don't want me and Papa Greg to be fighting for the house, so you can have this document where you say, I leave everything to Ntabiseng, So have those kind of conversations.
So I suppose it's about approach, and as you say, now we have a platform like yours to send everybody to say, here's the information. Let's read it, let's talk about it. Do you understand it? And yeah, I think I am thinking now that it's just maybe just an approach thing.
Absolutely.
Then my almost final question. What are you doing to upskill yourself and future skill yourself? So is you having written and passed, congratulations by the way, and waiting admission as a notary?
Yay, thank you.
Is it a way of you upskilling yourself or future skilling yourself, or was it something that you were always going to do?
So upskilling myself is part of my daily bread. This whole life thing, everything we're doing in our lives, everything we're doing with our careers, there's no final destination. Like, you don't get there and you say, oh, I'm Elon Musk, I can stop working now, I don't want to make more money, or I don't want more resources. You're always going to consistently want better for yourself. So upskilling myself is part of my daily bread. The books that I read, the podcasts that I listen to, the conversations I have with people, the intentional networking that I do with some people in and out of the legal profession, the studying that I do, the short courses. I've done short courses in the past and now writing my notary exam. All of those are part and parcel of constantly professionally and personally upskilling myself. So you don't have to focus on one thing to empower or upskill yourself. You can listen to podcasts, motivational podcasts. You can be intentional about the books you read. Yes, every once in a while we'll dabble and read things like 50 Shades of Grey, but that's not building us.
Yeah.
Be intentional about the material that you want to read. Eventually parts of personal development do seep in and speak to parts of your professional development as well. So those are the kind of things I do to upskill or empower myself.
No, thank you so much, Tebello. I think this conversation for me has, not only learning about yourself, learning about someone that I think many of us in the legal profession have watched and have, like I said, we've only really get a glimpse of you from being on the other side. So it's just nice to learn about who you are. So I'm really grateful for your time. No, man, thank you so much. You're very inspiring, and I wish you all the best with sister-in-law, with collective intelligence, and everything else that you continue to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Thabiseng. The conversation honestly does not end here. I am a very easy person to locate and find. So I'm sure once you've shared my details, website, social media pages, or whatever the case is, whoever's listening to this episode, the conversation doesn't stop here. I really, really am so passionate about empowering, especially young Black women. I am contactable, I'm approachable. Obviously, make sure your approach is fine,
Yes.
Make sure that in your email you introduce yourself nicely. Tell me what it is that you're interested in and tell me how I can help you, let's have a conversation. Let me see what I can do or who I can refer you to or the resources I can put you in touch with to help you elevate yourself. So the conversation does not end here. I really would encourage people to reach out to me. And I really do try to respond to everybody and give everybody a piece of my time, or, when I'm not able to, I try to match you with somebody who can assist you. So please, the conversation doesn't end here. Like I say, thank you so much for this platform. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Tebello. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.